Yep, it's done. It's useless, but it's done. And it's useless because I really can think of no way in which this thing is remotely as good as a more modern receiver. But this is a Bosch D.A.C 90A, which I have been restoring. This restoration required replacing the electrolytic capacitors, which were turned to gloop, and replacing all but one of the axial wax capacitors, the last ones in the post. Once all that was done, and the dust removed, and the flaking off insulation wiring replaced, and the rotary switch for the band select, which crumbled into dust, but once all that was done, it worked. And to show it working, now the dial light is the brightest, and then they dim. There's a reason for that. And nothing happens because this is tube tech, and it takes a minute for the filaments to warm up. The only bit that I can't really restore is around here. Firstly, because the replacement rotary switch shaft is too short and the wrong size.
It was about -2, and I'd said to a friend, should we go for a run tonight? Now, a run in my current state is a run and a walk kind of thing. So I'm not exactly...
Note the amount of background hum. Right, I can't replace the knob because it broke, and it wouldn't fit the new shaft anyway. That's old brittle plastic. The grub screw was completely stuck solid, could not get it out, and in the attempt I just ended up shattering the knob. I can put a similar looking vintage knob on, I suppose. When it comes to the insides, functionally this is the scariest, worst designed power supply I've ever encountered. 1958 engineering. First problem is the one side of the input, which is an unpolarized connector, goes through a shunt resistor that powers the dial lighting straight to the chassis of the thing. That includes the shafts on which these knobs are mounted. So if the family child pulled one of these knobs off and you reach in and just try to twiddle the shaft, you'll be clutching one side of mains and you die. Yeah. Not exactly up to modern safety standards, is it? The other side of the mains input goes through a dropper resistor, which takes it from 220 through 250 voltage. There's a selector in this you have to set for the mains input voltage, and drops it down to 180 volts peak, not RMS peak. That then goes through a single diode to supply the capacitor for the 180 volt rail. This means it is a half wave rectifier, because back when this was made, diodes were a tube component and they were expensive. So if you can get away with just one of them, do so. A better quality radio would use a transformer on the input and then a dual diode tube, which would have been a much better way to do it to get a cleaner signal, and you wouldn't get this hum. However, this is not a high-end radio. This is some sort of mid-end radio. I looked up the price at the time and converted to modern money, and it was the equivalent of about 400 quid. So, mid-range. The 180 volt rail feeds the audio output transformer, which is need a tube, of course. It then goes through another dropper resistor to supply the 97 volt rail, and the 97 volt rail is the power source for all of the radio side. It is a superhet with a very interesting multifunction tube, sort of like a primitive IC. Does the local oscillator, the mixing, the first stage RF amplification. Pretty nifty thing actually, all in one tube. The final thing it does on way out is dial lighting, or way in, depending how you look at it. This is not by any means remotely safe by modern standards. If it doesn't electrocute you, it will catch fire. Because most of the energy going in just gets dumped in that gigantic dropper resistor, it all comes off as heat. And when they look inside, every component near that resistor has been visibly baked. The transformer is semi-molten and blackened, the output transformer, because there is no input one. The insulation has been baked and is flaking off the wires. One of the capacitors was slightly melted. It's well, it's 1958 engineering. And I suppose maybe we'd just beaten the Nazis a decade ago and we still felt we were invincible. I turn up again.
A lot calmer, so no, it's I had an amazing.
If I take my adjustment device,
and certainly sitting here is slightly easier.
And yes, this is also connected straight to main, so insulated screwdriver. I can just switch the band, and if I tune somewhere up here.
In the wrong place with Scotland. To be honest, I don't think you do fit in anywhere. You're like a no man's land here. Your economy revolves around biscuits. Your biggest cult hero is a fleet of lorries because Eddie Stobart isn't just a haulage firm, it's your most famous icon. And it is, of course, the most obvious place to have a haulage firm, right on the far edge of the country, 600 miles from anywhere.
And we can hear someone on the radio insulting Scotland. They can take it. The thing that really surprised me is the scale was in meters. I wouldn't have expected something so metric from the era. Although I do note that the manual lists all frequencies in kilocycles. I don't know when the term hertz became more widespread. I know it was used on the continent a lot earlier than in the UK. I think there was some unpleasantness with Germany and might have made us a little bit reluctant to recognise a German contribution to the field. These things happen. As this thing is in every possible way inferior to modern technology, although it does work, and I've picked up a French station on here, so it's still decently sensitive, not to mention being a death trap, I'm going to wait till that final capacitor arrives, stick that in, maybe it'll do something about the hum, and then I'm going to take it to a ham down the road who knows someone who collects vintage radios, and hopefully they will have a use for it. I should also present it. Honestly, the person I got it from is my grandfather, and between the senility and the cancer, I don't think he's really in any condition to care whether he gets this back or not. Well, age happens too. So, off to the collector this goes. And, there is one more thing to mention. This is an AM radio, and there's a very good reason that AM radio is largely fallen out of use these days. In order to test this thing, I've had to shut off half the electrics in the house. Because
still smells better than we.
Yeah.
But to America's enemies, I say this: we will be tough. Be in no doubt. I curse the fate.
MMA, interruption spéciale. Benoît, que se passe-t-il à Concarneau? Rien du tout. Comment ça? Est-ce le conducteur qui a laissé sa voiture accidentée au garage? Mais non, avec la
even a simple lamp kills it.
Étape par étape les réparations de sa voiture. Photo à l'appui. Et il est alerté quand elle est disponible. MMA, toujours premium pour ses clients.
I have no idea what they're saying. Right, well, for any curious collectors who wish more information on it, there's the thing on the back. Bush radio type D.A.C 90A, serial number 73/244765. I am not going to show you the innards because I think this video is long enough already. I managed to get to 10 minutes by rambling at the camera. Oh well. Yep, I've got nothing more to say on it, so goodbye.